G'day guys, Phils20 here and welcome back to Springfield. We've been working on this series for almost a year now. I think when we wrap this up, it's going to be a year. So that's pretty exciting. It's pretty great to be doing something for that amount of time. You can see how much detail we've been putting into places and how much of the city is now complete, which is very exciting. There are still some chunks and we only have a couple more episodes to go. So I will be talking a bit about the future of this series in this episode and what those episodes are going to look like. This episode has been a bit of a long time coming. It's been something that has been very much long requested. In every episode, someone's always said, when are you going to build the Springfield Gorge? And I just always knew that it was going to be one of the last things that I built. So I went into this really excited to do it because it's just one of my earliest and longest memories of watching The Simpsons is this episode where Bart tries to jump the Springfield Gorge with his skateboard. We'll get into the logistics and that whole part of the episode when we get to it. But it's just been something that I've been wanting to do for such a long time. And then I have to admit, this episode was honestly not that fun to put together. I really struggled. I had a really hard time making what I had in my mind work within this game. And it just was not happening. And I was getting so angry. I was getting really frustrated at it. I threw in the towel so many times. There was one stage where I was just like, stuff it, I can't do this. And I quit and I unsubscribed from all the mods and assets and I loaded up Oceania instead. I was like, nah, let's just build in this one for a while. And then I got my mojo back and decided to jump back in and give it one last crack and finally got it complete. And now that it is complete, looking back at the footage, I think, okay, what was I complaining about? This is not so bad. This is working, it looks fine. But when I was building it, it just felt like I was never going to see the end product. I never thought I'd ever see it finished. And I've probably built the most amount of stuff I've ever built in one episode too. So this is a very big episode. It's jammed into the normal time frame of 22 minutes. And it really boils down to me putting in too much detail into such things like you can see me doing right now. Trying to expand out this whole area because I didn't want to return to this area. I wanted to finish it in this episode, so I expand out a lot. And then just the complexity of trying to make the gorge, it made for a very big build. So this is what you're going to see. It's like I'm a little less positive than I usually am with these episodes. I'm usually quite like, oh yeah, I had a great time. It was lots of fun. I had an absolute ball. Can't wait to do it again. Not so much for this episode. But with that being said, I am really glad that I put that extra bit of work into it because it's finished. This whole area is complete. I'm happy with how it looks now. Looking back at the footage, I think it works. But during that time, I did not see the end. I did not see the end of this area. I mean, look at this thing that we just built here, guys. I mean, Slaughterhouse, had to do it. Of course, making reference to Troy McClure and Little Jimmy.
Hello, Bobby.
Jimmy!
Or whatever his name was.
Come on, Jimmy. Let's take a peek at the killing floor. Don't let the name throw you, Jimmy. It's not really a floor. It's more of a steel grating that allows material to sluice through so it can be collected and exported.
But this is something that, again, had to do, or I always knew that it was going to be out in this area, in this farmland, and it's a little fun little detail there, if you can remember that episode. But we are working around, like we're not quite at the gorge yet. We are going to be doing some work stretching towards that area. What we are doing around here is we're going to start doing some detail on this highway. I would actually like to do a driving video out this way, like a little road trip, maybe going towards Springfield, the downtown. So we'll probably end up doing that at some stage. But this little area down here, it's just a little industrial zone that I wanted to put together. So nothing too fancy, but I think it does make for some like more realistic types of elements of cities, you know, especially around the outer skirts and these spots within cities that don't really have huge amount of purpose. There's like just a plot of land. You don't really want to put any houses here. You don't really want to put anything else here. It's good for a little bit of industry. So just got some random piles of stuff and I'm just keeping it pretty simple. I'm literally just searching for industrial stuff within Find It and just placing down anything that I think looks okay in piles, like just anything really. Like I'm not like sorting out not making sure that it's anything, in sort of some particular theme. Although it does sort of work, once you find one prop or one building that sort of matches some sort of industrial place. Like I found a whole bunch of construction props, like trucks and bulldozers and stuff. Figured, okay, well maybe this is like a holding ground for some sort of construction site. So you can start imagining and, piecing together some sort of industrial area. I mean, industrial areas are like the easiest places to put together because they are just usually a random bunch of buildings and props, and put a couple of piles and random fences in places, then you can call it some sort of industrial area. But now we're starting to work on this highway that stretches out towards the Springfield Badlands, which is where the Springfield Gorge is. So I've like sort of bundled in a couple of different types of environments, which is a little bit tricky because the Springfield Badlands are, it's essentially, I guess, sort of like a desert. And I think this is where I was getting really stuck because I was trying to make a bit of a desert at first, but then I've got these big pine trees that are around here. So I was trying to make a bit of a transition and then also trying to use some of the ground resources just to make it a bit dry around here. So I think that's a little bit of the part where I got stuck, was trying to make this a very dry desert. But then instead, towards the end, I ended up just making this a farm area, like another big chunk of agriculture, and not so much the Springfield Badlands. I think they would be a little further out. And I think that's where I got a bit stuck. I was thinking that the Springfield Gorge would be in the desert, but looking at some reference shots, not so much. There's a bunch of pine trees around. It sort of feels a little bit more of a mix between a desert and a forest, which is exactly what we go for. So that was like a bit of a step in the right direction when I figured that out. But we do have a big forest here, trying to integrate the mountain a little bit more with it. And something I did just a little earlier that I didn't talk about was placing down a bunch of billboards coming into the city. I just wanted to use them a lot more. And I was trying to use some that fit in this sort of area. So there's a billboard of Cletus, and there's Clown College, which I felt like needed to be a little bit more advertised around. So I did that. But as you can see, I'm just really struggling with what type of, sort of like transition to this browner earth. I think this might have to be like the last time I try and incorporate a desert within, like another temperate environment. I know Oceania also has a desert, but I really need to stop doing it because it's a real struggle to get the biomes to, like the environments to transition in some sort of a realistic way. So I think I might need to just like call it for a little while within Cities Skylines. But what you end up seeing me do is I'll start sort of blending in a bit more of greener grass within this area where the farms are. So we've got these houses that are on these roads. Somebody mentioned a couple of weeks ago that it's not that realistic to have houses right on these roads. You're probably right. In Australia, we tend to have houses like right on these highways. Maybe it's more of an Australian thing than anything else. I guess technically they should probably have longer driveways or something, but I'm not about to start absolutely detailing these things up. I think just adding the houses is enough detail for areas that sort of sprawl out this way. There's a lot of farmland in Springfield, and like a lot of stuff happens around here, and I would have liked to have added in some extra things. There's that hippie farm that I wanted to add in that Homer goes to. So I think you just have to imagine that they're there rather than me spending 20 minutes trying to find the right house and making sure that the tree's in the right spot. I think it's fine just to imagine that they live out this way. And I'm going to add them to the map. I'll make sure that those houses and those places are on the Springfield map, which if you haven't seen already, go and check out. It's on my website. Because I'm sort of working towards finishing the map, and I'm also working towards finishing that map that sits in the workshop. So not on the workshop, on my website. They're like my goals at the moment. It's not really so much to do crazy amounts of detail, although you're gonna see crazy amounts of detail in just a short moment. In fact, this gorge that we're starting to work on right now pretty much takes up the bulk of the amount of time that I spent on this episode, and mostly because in order to make cliff faces look like they do from the show, I had to actually use some of these boulders and scale them up using procedural objects. The reason why I had to use these cliffs I should say, is because the actual cliff face within the game that I've already got loaded in, it's not the right color. And I probably could have, and I probably would have been fine if I just continued using that cliff face instead and said, oh, you know, it's just slightly different color. But I wanted to make sure that it was red, or at least this brownish color, you know, just to fit in with, you know, how it looks from the show as much as possible. And, you know, I was able to, like, you know, this is sort of my test run here, just seeing how well I can make it blend in. I'm using these trees as well, these pine trees, just to cover up any weird gaps and, you know, trying to hide any of that gray cliff face that's sort of poking through. But, you know, I was like, okay, no, this is working. This should be totally fine. But then to make it throughout the entire thing was really hard because, you know, it changes every single area that I try to piece together. And, you know, probably didn't really matter so much, but it really mattered to me. Like, it really mattered how detailed and how accurate I could make it. And then once I started, I couldn't stop. You know, I couldn't just go like, oh, no, I'm just going to delete it all and, you know, try a different technique. I'd figured, nah, I've gotten this far, let's just plow through it. But it is sort of working, and changing like the ground color around it too, to make it a bit more red and earthy, I think does help. It's easy as well using some of you know, procedural objects just to change some of the nodes, and well, I guess not really nodes, change some of the vertices. Are the vertices, what are they? Little points that I can sort of change the direction of. Doing that helps a lot. Means that I can fit it right underneath that highway and, you know, make some cliff face areas just look a bit better. And then I realized, like, looking over towards this river, that I had so much more to go, and I just was like, no, there's no way I could possibly do this technique throughout the entire area. So I decided to make a, you know, this area over here instead is going to be a river. And then the gorge actually starts just a little bit closer towards the bridge, and there's like a waterfall. So, and I thought that made a little bit more sense anyway. And plus, it just would have meant that I would have had to have done a lot of work in areas that just would not, you know, they're like on the very far edge on the map. And I'm not really, you know, it's not really such a big deal to be working that far out that way. But another challenge that I was having was the transition from the gorge to, I guess, towards Springfield, and how that was going to look and, you know, make sense too. So that was definitely something I had to consider when making it. Probably something I should have thought about when I first started using procedural objects to make these cliffs, because I first started and I was like, oh yeah, this is working. And then when I started like expanding out and realizing the scope of all this, then I realized maybe probably should have gone with another technique. And these trees too, these pine trees, are really great at hiding a lot of the cliff that's poking through some of the areas that, you know, didn't really want to be exposed. And but it's starting to come together. It's working in areas for sure. I mean, that was a bit of a quick thing, but I just placed in that bridge, which I think just looks awesome there. It's makes for some really great cinematics. So yeah, stay for the cinematics, because there's some really really nice shots of that bridge. It really frames this whole area. Now I'm trying to work on that transition, but you can see I decided to keep this in, even though I probably could have left a lot of it out. You know, like the real world, like a transition like this from like different types of rocks and different types of environments happen over like kilometers and kilometers, and you know, the change happens gradually. Whereas in Cities Skylines, I don't have a huge amount of space to do it. So it's not like the most realistic looking change, but I think in terms of like what we're trying to set out to achieve, I think that's okay. Now it's time to work on the centerpiece for all this. This is where Bart attempts to jump Springfield Gorge. So if you haven't seen the episode, it's an episode, a really old one. I think it's from season 1 or season 2 of The Simpsons. And Bart, basically, the daredevil, tries to jump Springfield Gorge. Homer quickly runs and stops him from jumping over, and then accidentally like goes down the skateboard and like just falls down the gorge. It's a really great scene. It's a really great episode. Lots of fun moments. But he tries to use, well, he doesn't try, he uses this as a ramp, which in the show is like super, of course, like unrealistic. It like looks ridiculous. And trying to make it within Cities Skylines is also kind of ridiculous. especially like trying to make a mountain sort of work within this. I think within the movie it looks better. It's, you know, they've actually thought about how it could actually look in a realistic fashion. That sounds ridiculous, but it looks better than it does from that, you know, it does from the 90s at least. But, you know, trying to make it with this is really tricky. So what I did here was I'm using procedural objects just to make these rocks just, you know, work a little bit better. And then I'm using some pine trees just because they're nice and tall. They can poke through some of these rocks. And the real bugger of a thing is it's just like it's all rock. I couldn't really get any sort of grass or any of the ground texture poking through. So I actually had to use a lot of prop grass pieces just to blend it in a little bit better. There's a lot of detail around there, and I think it works a lot better than just having a bare rock. But even though like the shot from like season 2, like from the actual episode, is just rock, I think it looks a little bit more natural when I do it that way. That sort of came together really quickly, but in real life it did not come together really quickly. Now we're working on the parking lot just on the other side. So something that I was thinking about with this was like whereabouts the jump was, and I realized that it was on the other side of the gorge, not basically where the school bus is parked. So that's why I did it over that way, even though I don't know how Bart got over there in the first place. But I guess if we're going to start poking holes in the logic of this, I'm sure we could probably poke holes in other aspects of it. But yeah, I got the school bus there and a bit of a viewing platform too, because this is a national park. Made sure I made it to a parkland so people are visiting. And then there is this crashed ambulance that I've got crashed into a tree from the first attempt at rescuing Homer from the gorge. So that's just, that was like a nice easy thing to put down there. And there's some really great effects you can use. You can use some like smoke to just place, yeah, looks awesome. I'm pretty happy with that. And it's even the Springfield, like from the show, the Springfield ambulance, someone's made that. So thank you whoever made that. Like there are just like a couple of random props and vehicles out there that people have made, and it's just so cool. So yeah, I'm really glad that I could actually physically place down that vehicle. And now we're starting to just work on the river a little bit, just blend it in. This is, you know, now that I've already like finished the gorge, I was feeling a bit defeated by this point, just because it didn't turn out how I expected. I had really high hopes for it, and after building it, I was like, oh, this sucks. Like I'm not happy with it. Looking back at it, I think it looks fine. I am quite happy with it. But when I first built it, I was really, I was disappointed. I was really disappointed, to be honest. So at this stage, I'm like, oh, I've got to build something else. People are going to hate this. It looks stupid. I've got to build at least the farm. I've got to build like this whole surrounding area. So I decided to build out this whole area. Figured I'd complete this whole part of Springfield. I'll actually, at the very end of this episode, I build something like another reference. So it's coming up. It's coming up. But I just figured I would complete this whole area with some agriculture. This would make a bit of sense to be some big sprawling farmland. And I think it actually does really blend in quite nicely. So it's also quite nice as well because you've got all this really dry, desolate sort of area. I know there's like a whole bunch of pine trees around, but it's definitely a lot drier than it is like towards Springfield. And then where the paddocks are, it's just much greener. And I really like that. I think it's a really nice transition and a nice contrast, and it just makes it feel quite realistic. I think the cinematics really paint it a lot better than, you know, through these time lapses. But, you know, just some sprawling, some windy roads, just branching out and trying to connect up some areas. I'm following a lot of the roads, like the pre-existing roads within Springfield to like drag out those networks. So they are sort of sprawling out in a realistic fashion as well, which I do quite like. And now I'm starting to work on the last bit of detail for this area, which is the Simpson farm. And I knew I wanted to build this. This is where the tobacco farm is, and there's actually some tobacco like props that have been made, so I've actually made sure to use some of them. And you know, out of all the buildings that I've placed down within this series, like the actual farmhouse from the show is really similar to this building. So I placed that down and I was like, you know what? I don't even have to change anything. It's pretty much exactly it. But something that was a bit tricky because I wanted to place down these tomato bushes, these tomaco bushes, I guess, vines. Unfortunately, they were like really bright. They didn't look quite right. So I ended up using a rose bush instead, and it works really nicely. So this is the tomaco farm, and yeah, just adding in just some bits and pieces, some dirt decals, and make it look a little bit dry because Homer doesn't take the best care of the farm. Place down the tractor, of course, the tractor that keeps on falling over, and yeah, that's pretty much this whole area. And that, guys, is it for today's episode. Thank you all so much for watching and for your support for this series. It's been a lot of fun working on Springfield, and I am a little bit sad that we've only got another 2 more episodes left. But as you can also tell, I am working to complete. I am excited to see the whole place finished, and I'm excited for the end cinematic video that I'm going to put together. But because we are wrapping it up, please let me know if you have any suggestions for things to add within the areas that we haven't finished yet. Yeah, I'll be really keen to hear what you guys have to say. Before I head off, I want to give a special shout out to some of the people supporting the channel via Patreon. Emil, Dominic Martin, Ariane Banerjee, Tyler Smith, Lawrence Pitts, Lila Krieger, X313, Dan Dobson, and Minnie. Thank you all so much for your support, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!